record.
Yes, I'm just about to ensure that that's the case. Ian is going to start by explaining to us the late receipt of this objection from the East St Thomas Residents Forum, which has been done by Martin Willoughby. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give the context, members, Mr Willoughby did contact us prior to the meeting, advising us of an intent to want to submit this letter to discuss for all 11 items on planning applications on today's agenda. And while officers have been in correspondence with him seeking the full response, it was not received until during this meeting. Constitutionally, just to touch on that very briefly, your Constitution does state in Standing Order 24D IV that those attending may make written deputations. So those not attending actually have no right to make a written deputation. So you're constitutionally robust to have made the decisions you have done and indeed to make decisions that are still before you for the rest of this agenda. So please be reassured by that. The Principal Solicitor and I have had a quick review of that and we are satisfied. However, as is always the case, and clearly receipt of a correspondence which otherwise would have been added to your supplementary matters agenda paper, your SMAT, and with the Chairman's discretion exercise today has been circulated for your perusal in the break we've just had. Having read it myself just now, obviously the East St Thomas Residents Forum have raised issues that we know are of concern to residents, so the impact of PD and enlargement of HMOs, the impact from use of HMOs on noise and social behaviour, waste management, traffic and highways, the overall impact this has on the housing economy and demand for housing within the city, and then a specific reference is made on the penultimate page to the 83 Margate Road decision, which obviously I mentioned to residents myself in the opening to the 85 Margate Road determination. I would therefore be satisfied, members, that these are matters that you can give weight to and indeed have given weight to in the determinations you've already made and can consider what weight to give the express wording that you've now had an opportunity to read in the other 4 applications that you are currently and will continue to resolve for 3 Playfair, 14 Hudson, 3 Paynes and 22 Montgomery Roads.
Everybody happy with that? Then we'll proceed. We're on 3 Playfair Road, just about to start that application, page 80, page 76, 3 Playfair Road. Ian, do you want to introduce this?
Certainly so. 3 Playfair, I'm not sure if I've actually given the presentation or not yet.
Have you done?
I believe I have done, haven't I? So
had he done a presentation on that, had he? Yes, okay, so we'd done the presentation. We noticed there on page 77 that 6 representations have been received that are very much on the lines of the submission from the Residents Association as well. And we were just having questions and talking about the relative sizes of the lounge, kitchen and dining room and so forth. Had we already agreed whether or not we wanted to judge this to be development? No. I suggest, as we've done with previous applications, we decide whether or not this is development. Is it material enough for us to consider it as a planning application? Darren.
Judith, sorry. I was absent for the presentation of 3 Playfair Road and came back in for the discussion around Martin and everything else. So on that basis, I will exempt myself from voting on this item.
Thank you very much. You will have to absent yourself this from us.
I'm not sure that's right, because we didn't talk about it after the break.
No, we didn't.
I don't think we had the presentation either.
I should have gone with my instinct.
Yes, because when the pictures flashed across, I thought I haven't seen those.
Okay, my apologies. So
can we go back to
my recollection is wrong,
I must say,
and I apologise for my recollection being wrong.
On that one. So we're going to start again, which means that anybody who wasn't here for something that didn't happen or whatever can still participate. So Ian, would you please present to us the 3 Playfair Road application, page 76, yes, because we did 4 Playfair Road, yeah.
Happy to say, honestly, at this point I cannot remember which we've presented. So 3 Playfair
I think we're all
Road.
in a similar situation. So
again, the usual images of the property on the other side of the road, down
page
one
76
from the
3
church.
Playfair Road. Thank you.
So again, this one, we're looking for a 6-7 change. The changes, unsurprisingly, this ground floor study from a study to a bedroom. As you can see there, some images of the building as we have
I wonder
at
if
the
you
moment.
could speak up, because I seem to be getting
Sorry, I think
as the day has gone on. And
Yeah.
second of all, I know one or two other members have said that we need to speak up a little bit.
Apologies, it may be that I'm losing my voice. So, as I say, that ground floor bed study, as you can see, far left of the image, turning to a bedroom on the same far left of the image, and then some images of the building at the same time. To head off the questions, 3 Playfair Road was licensed for 7 people on the 10th of June 2021. And just to add, which I don't think we've put in the SMAT, so with my apologies, just quickly looking at paragraph 5.4, where we've listed 36 HMOs out of the 69 properties and a percentage of 47.8%. I think that's actually incorrect. From recollection, it's actually 33 of the 69 are HMOs, not 36, so the percentage would consequently be a higher number. So I think it's actually, we've swapped over HMOs and Resi in that point. So just to clarify, that doesn't in any way, of course, change the judgment or recommendation. About half of the properties in this area are already HMOs. As before, the application is considered by officers to not require planning permission for that change. Members will need to come to a judgment on that and then judge it against our space standards. You can see from the table on 5.5 and the floor plans on above 5.6 that this fully meets our space standards in a similar way as number 4 did.
Any questions for Ian? Steve?
Yeah, Ian, this wording's slightly different on the title of the application, because it says change use as Class C for blah, 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 for use by more than 6 persons without specifying a number.
It says later on in the report on page 80 up to 7 occupants, but
Yeah, it's just that the
8
application
is mentioned.
doesn't specify.
Yes, indeed, we are obliged to take the applicant's description
Yeah.
in most cases, so they've put that in. Yes, we can confirm that the applicant, during the correspondence associated with the application, that this is an application for 7 occupants.
Darren?
Thank you, Judith. As part of his deputation, Mr. Willoughby refers to SPD 20, particularly where it says where in cases like this, in areas where concentrations of HMOs exceed the 10% threshold, the council will consider the potential harm to amenity caused by an increase in the number of bedrooms in an already unbalanced community. Mr. Willoughby then gives figures in the table below on that. I'm assuming, Ian, that is a factor in the remaining applications, given that this particular area, unlike others, there is that already unbalanced community. And is SPD 20 any clearer as to what sort of amenity we're meant to consider?
Yes, SPD, the HMO SPD dealing with PCS 20 deals with a number of different activities which are obviously relevant for amenity. Members, I think, are fully aware of them. Indeed, this representation does include them. The key ones, of course, are access to the availability of on-street parking, noise disturbance, associated antisocial behaviour, and usually the management of waste and or cycle storage as part of a scheme, all going relevant to amenity, and that's examined in more detail in your guidance and obviously discussed where relevant in the reports as well.
Thank you for that, Ian.
Any other questions? Quite a lot is made in this of the numbers of people. Our standard, which is about the 50-metre radius, is about properties, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yes.
So the numbers don't actually, in terms of our policy there, matter in terms of the 50-metre ratio.
Yes, as has been discussed earlier today, your policy is a generic one about mixed and balanced communities. We help the interpretation of that policy through our guidance in the SPD, and the guidance focuses purely on the total number of dwellings, HMO versus non-HMO dwellings, rather than the bed spaces within it. That has been a challenge for this council, I understand, before I came here over those years, and quite understandably, I would suggest, for the same reasons I gave earlier, you don't know how many bedrooms are in any given dwelling, whether they've been altered by PD or not. How people choose to use the rooms within the house will vary enormously depending on the nature of their family occupation.
Any other questions from anybody else here? If not, then I will assume that we should move to deciding whether or not this is a material development that requires a planning application. Would you like to raise your hands to? We haven't had a proposal yet.
I was going to propose
However,
for a
Councillor
change.
Simpson was available.
Sorry?
He'd already raised his hand. Russell had already raised
I'm
his
happy
hand.
to propose
Yeah,
it based
thank
on
you very
the.
much. We need a proposal.
on the,
Seconder, please. Would you like to articulate the motion?
It was based on the beautiful words by Steve Pitt.
Are you happy to?
I can repeat the words
repeat
should
the
members
words for us,
necessary,
please.
but obviously members have heard them
Thank you.
8 times beforehand regarding intensity of standard of accommodation, impacts on amenity and other matters, and notably impact on the solar special protection area.
Yes.
Those words?
Yes, that's one.
Okay. And is anybody prepared to second that? John will second it. Caught my eye first. And now we will move to take a vote on whether or not we think this should have a planning application. Unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to see whether or not, given that it has to have a planning application, we want to refuse or to agree the proposal. Are we on to comments now? We've asked the questions generally, but if anybody had a specific question arising for that previous decision, they could make it. Otherwise, comments now, please, on this application. We now know that it's going to be to 7 people, and would that be specified on any decision notice?
No, not under the current drafting. Clearly, members can either impose an informative, to be clear on that, or ultimately, if they feel it's a justified position, impose a condition to be clear that that has been the nature of the determination. Any grant would obviously need the time limit condition, the approved plan condition that expressly lists 7 bedrooms, but obviously doesn't talk about the occupancy of those bedrooms and the appropriate nitrates restrictions as previously discussed.
So whatever we decide, I'm proposing that we put a limit of 7 on this in accordance with the planning application, whatever is decided. Russell.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question. I mean, I've seen this on multiple applications, multiple layouts. And I know this question was asked a few planning committees ago, but the use of the double beds with each time we see these implies that it's 14 and not 7. Now, we know it's 7, but there's this kind of element of what do we do to inspect to make sure it stays at 7 and that there isn't one couple that's going to be in there that makes it 8 or makes it 9 and so forth?
So to assist the committee, that's very much what private sector housing does in the regular review for licensing. It's licensed for 7, as we discussed earlier. The Plan Commission is obviously regularising that licence discrepancy, if you will. Licensing undertake inspections both reactively and proactively to ensure that is the case. It is, of course, perfectly plausible, and indeed I've lived in a circumstance of this myself as well, where a bedroom may be occupied by a couple and another bedroom held empty to maintain that 7 licensable issue, where that bedroom is fit for double occupancy, which is obviously a larger 11 metre standard contained within, again, the private sector housing and licensing requirements.
All right, now, Russell.
Yes, thank you.
Darren.
Thank you. Just to assist Russell, if additional licensing occurs, one of the consequences of that will be there will be more people to do inspections because there will be more properties to be inspected. One of the issues that we've raised before, particularly with 83 Margate Road, was that number of bedrooms had been increased perfectly legally under permitted development, which comes back a lot of what the St Thomas Forum has just said. But yes, it is a consequence there'll be more people to do inspections because there will be more inspections, which hopefully will deal with this.
Scott?
On the point about additional licensing, I mean, I do have a bit of experience in this area after the last couple of years of shadowing Councillor Sanders, which has been quite interesting. You notice about there'll be more inspections because there'll be more enforcement officers. There'll also actually probably end up being less HMOs in terms of the fact that the licence fees are going up, so that they're actually probably not going to be selling them. So you might actually see this committee getting less coming forward rather than more.
Anybody got any other... George?
Just a quick comment. Obviously, the room sizes meet our current minimum standards. I agree that whilst we haven't been doing this up until now, because it's set out as a 7 double-bedroom property, that we put a condition on the planning, if we choose to grant planning permission, that it should be 7 individuals occupying the property.
Were you making a recommendation as well? Or? Councillor Pitt, would you like to...
7 persons occupying the property.
If members would like guidance on the imposition of a condition, slight grey area, unlike the means of escape, which is clearly out with and covered expressly by alternative issues, because of the ambiguity of the description, all the others pretty much have used 7 persons in there, so there's a clear definition of what the development being sought, or the proposal being sought would be. Because of the ambiguity in this specific case, members could feel that there's a reasonable requirement to do that by condition, above perhaps just doing it by an informative. Obviously, licensing again, however, does deal with a large part of this. None of these rooms are big enough to be licensed for couples sharing. So licensing would prevent couples being in them. So there are scenarios where, and plenty of them we've seen, where bedrooms have been big enough for couples to share, and you could still have 7, or you could have, 2, 3 couples in a room and a spare, room in there. Again, a scenario I've lived in myself. So that would all be within it. In this case, if they wanted to put couples in these rooms, licensing would not be in a position to license them, because the minimum licence standard isn't in your HMO SPD, but is in your September 2018 private sector housing guidance, is 11 square metres for couples. So licensing will cover that for you, and thus there's not a necessity for a condition. However, because it is a grey area and the ambiguity of here, I don't think any lawyer would take you to task by imposing, as an exception to the rule, such a condition on this application.
Is everybody agreeable that we put that in then? Yep, good. Any further comments or recommendations? Russell, have you got your hand up? I can't see. No? Okay. Okay. Is anybody wanting to move a recommendation? Okay, well, I'll move that, because the space standards are basically okay. They're very small rooms, and we've got up to 41 square metres, and it's only 1 additional room because we're saying that it's being limited to 7. With a heavy heart, I will recommend that we grant this planning permission. Have I a seconder? Thank you, Linda.
And Chairman, for clarity, I assume that's with the time limit condition, the approved plans condition, the nitrates and recreational disturbance, a resolution subject to 106, and the additional further condition limiting occupancy to 7 persons.
It certainly is. Thank you very much indeed. So subject to those recommendations, could I ask for a seconder for that? I have, Linda, and now I'd like anybody who agrees with that recommendation to raise their hands. Okay. 2, 3. Then I'd like people who are against that recommendation to raise their hands, please. And anybody abstaining? So 3, 4, 5 against, 5 abstentions. Yeah. Is it okay making a decision like that? Is that? Okay, a difficult one. Right, okay, now let's move on to item 10, which is 14 Hudson Road, and it's page 82.
Again, an area with a significant number of existing HMOs. I think this is actually the highest percentage we have already in any of the applications before you today. You can see on this existing floor plan, the existing layout. Apologies, members, I'll start that again. The normal slide deck, this application, I think, is the one with the highest percentage of existing HMOs within the catchment area, as laid out in the report. You can see from the existing floor plans a ground floor lounge, which is being converted to bedroom 7. In this case, that is the change proposed. As you'll see from paragraph 5.5 of the report, all of the rooms meet the necessary standards. Quite a few of the bedrooms are over 10 metres, some are not, and consequently the communal space standard requirement is 34 metres, and they provided 34 metres, or 34.02 metres as the standard, so it fully meets your policies. Should they be relevant, again, members, it's obviously incumbent upon you to decide whether a material change of use has occurred, and consequently, if it does, as development, whether it complies with those policies, as I've just described it does, and whether plan permission should therefore be granted.
Thank you. Any questions for Ian on the report and on what he said? George?
Could Ian please confirm when this was licensed as a 7-person HMO?
Hudson was licensed on the 22nd of September 2020. I'm tempted to tell you the other two as well while I remember, but we'll get on to those in time. Yeah. Just to be clear, it was no, that's the next one. Yeah, 22nd of September 2020.
Darren?
Just as a process point, because I think George is going to carry on asking this all evening, which is fine, it might be useful to ensure that as part of the future agendas for these things, that the dates when things were licensed are actually on the agenda and actually form part of the report, because my notes are, my question was going to be, has a licence been secured? On the basis of the evidence that was given by private sector housing. It might be sensible actually to say it needs it and this was the date, and that I think will help us along the way.
We will certainly ask private sector housing to include that in their responses in the future.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think that's a good idea. George?
Can Ian clarify when the application for certificate of lawful development was granted, because the date appears to be a little bit skew-with.
Which page of the report are you looking at, George?
Yes, it wasn't 2098, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
I will have to have a look through our records, or indeed ask my team to do so. I will provide that update for you. This is the certificate of lawfulness that confirmed the use as a house of multiple occupancy, which says in here, granted 2098 for an application made in 2019. So some point after 2019, but I will confirm that for you once I've had a chance to ask the team to dig that out.
Okay. Shall we move to a decision about whether this requires planning?
Chairman, if I may, I can confirm it was granted in 2019. Yeah.
If there are no more questions, I'll move then to the consideration about whether this is a material enough change to require a planning application. Is anybody moving? Scott?
I don't know where this is going. Yeah, I think it does. I think we'll use the same wording that we've used all blimmin' evening. So yeah, I propose that one.
Second that one.
George will second that. We will go with the same wording as before, Ian, if that's okay. So having decided that this does require planning permission, we now need to... Oh, note. Thank you very much. It is a team effort. Would you like to show hands as to whether or not you agree that this requires planning permission? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Now we can move on to a discussion about, given that it does require planning application in our judgment, we would like to move on to discuss whether or not we would like to grant planning application or refuse it. Any comments on that?
Chairman, and with apologies because I had it in my notes but I didn't present it, just to draw members' attention obviously to paragraph 111 of the report. This was an application that's gone through a previous appeal for non-determination and was deemed to be found acceptable on all material matters barring that nitrates matter by the planning inspectorate. So one we've seen obviously in the past, slightly different of course in that the standards do actually meet our full our compliance standards as well.
And it was a non-determination, that's right. So that paragraph 111 is significant to us, as is the measurement of the rooms. And they do have, there is ensuite in this case. Would anybody like to make a comment and move to a recommendation, George?
The communal area with the kitchen is down the end of a long and narrow passage. Whilst determining this in its own merits, we have previously refused an application on the basis of that from comments from a planning inspector. Just putting that out there.
I was also, yeah. They get out. There's a door on the side of that room, isn't there, to get out to the bicycle storage shed. Steve?
I think as Councillor Fielding's just identified, the numbers are there as a guide. We have to decide whether they are realistic. For example, if that back bit from where the kitchen dining area starts was twice as long, it would still be 34 square metres, but it would basically be a 1 metre wide corridor. Would that be appropriate living conditions for the people who live in it? And the inspector, on a couple of different occasions that we've seen today, has picked up the long and narrow feeling. Now, this one is different, however, because the access door to outside is not halfway down the room and causing an awkward route. It's at that end of the room. So, but actually, you only had to look at the picture. It's impossible to put a dining room table and chairs in that space, allow enough room for people to walk past without putting the table and chairs against the wall. So if people are actually sat around those tables and chairs, they've got to get people to get out of the way so that they can get into the kitchen, which they might want to use because not everybody's going to eat at the same time. So, I know that these matters are complex, but when we're talking about quality of living conditions, you can make something look really lovely, but if it's not a nice, comfortable place to live in terms of usability, it's pretty poor, really.
Any other? Does that lead you to any conclusion?
Well, I'm agreeing with George that the inspector's made other comments that would seem, in other applications, that would seem pertinent to this application in terms of that. However, we do need to consider that in all likelihood, I think we'll lose it on appeal because the inspector would just say, well, I'm sorry, but it meets all your space standards and that there's no other valid reason to reject it because they're already rejecting them for all the, everything Martin says in here is right, but it doesn't make it work. Unfortunately, and he's quite right that we need to sort that out and make it work. But in the meantime, we've got a deluge of these things coming through for reassessment. So I think we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, to be honest.
Yeah, this one's particularly difficult for that balance, isn't it? And for the fact that on the figures it meets the standards, and the cycle, you could get a bicycle out that end, as George says, and it's but it is narrow. Do I have Darren?
For Judith and for Ian, given that this is in an area where we've exceeded the 10% threshold, and given we have a deputation that specifically refers to SPD 20, I understand what Ian was saying earlier on about storage and everything else, and given how close it is to a space standard that given our past decisions this afternoon, is of some importance to us. Can we use, if we were minded to refuse this, and it sounds like it's quite balanced here, Ian, would we be able to use SPD 20? Because given the drawings from what Steve and George are saying, the amenity for the occupier in the communal living space is a bit ropey.
Chairman, do you wish me?
Yes, please answer.
If we can just put the presentation back on, there are, I can't remember if I presented them to you, some photographs obviously of the site, so you can see specifically what the layout actually is in the real world. So there's from the kitchen and looking down at the dining space. Like other schemes, yes, that dining space acts as a throughfare to the kitchen. I don't know if anyone has a kitchen diner in their home, a very common layout. That's pretty normal. In this case, because they've chosen to place the exit door to the outside right at the bottom end, it doesn't actually act as a throughfare to the garden, so it's distinguishable in other circumstances through that. So we'd be suggesting that having a kitchen that one accesses through your dining room is an unacceptable living environment. I would challenge you on that point. So there's a point around that amenity issue. The broader issue around the prevalence of HMOs in the area, again, we can go back to the point that you don't have a policy on bed spaces, so there's nothing in that policy to utilise for a reason for refusal. This is whether you're making an individual assessment of the nature of the laid out space or using your numbers, and to say it's only just over the requirement is obviously a hiding to nowhere. You have a requirement. If you have any, you've refused floor play fare for being only just under the requirements. Got to be fair here on that basis. Yes, it's quite right and proper if they meet the numerical requirement, but the layout is just unusable, that it shouldn't be used. To suggest that the layout, as you can see in the photographs here, is an unusable one, would therefore apply to pretty much every HMO and many family homes that I'm aware of.
And another comment from the chair is they've all got en suite, unlike some of the others we've seen today. I think 30, just a tiny bit over 34 metres squared, isn't it? These are very difficult. It's always either side of a grey line. I'll propose from the chair that we do agree to the planning application, given that the basic size standard has been adhered to, and it isn't a through room to the back, and there are bathrooms and so on and so forth. Do I have a seconder at all? I propose that, subject to the conditions that we had before, including nitrates. And do I have a seconder? No. Okay. Well, then, would somebody else like to move an alternative recommendation? I did my best to get you going. It's now your turn. I guess you were all going to abstain, were you? That's rather nice. I mean, they are difficult, these applications, and we have to think of the public interest, and we have to take into account what's been raised, which is the quality of the environment is not ideal. What happens if we all abstain?
Just to get it to the vote, I will second what you've proposed.
Thank you, George. So, would you all like to vote to give this permission subject to the usual 4 conditions, including nitrates and the other conditions we've used with a heavy heart? I'll propose and would ask you to raise your hands if you agree. Okay. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you don't want to give it planning permission? You want to reject the application? But there were no hands up at all, so I passed by. Because nobody put their hands up to being for. And now, this is classic, isn't it? Your first proper planning committee as chair, and we get a complete... Now, I suppose we could have...
Sorry, if I may, you haven't asked for abstentions yet.
We haven't asked for
Yes,
abstentions yet.
okay. Can you put your hands up if you want to abstain?
I count that as 0 in favour, 0 against, 8 abstentions, and therefore it falls to the chairman's casting vote.
I thought I was going to recommend a site visit, actually.
Can we get some legal advice on, I think we are required to come to a conclusion, aren't we?
Yep. Because I think that the room is not for what I'm...
Again, I will apologies, Chair, through you to our legal services. You did suggest you were intending to seek a site visit. It is obviously open to the council to defer an item if there's a legitimate reason to do so. You have quite an obvious impasse, however,
Yes.
so whether you feel that will be of any benefit is
I
a
think I would
different
like to
matter.
propose that we defer and do a site visit.
Chair, I'm quite happy to second you on that, to be honest.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. It's a rare thing that I would recommend a site visit, but I think in this case it's the only fair thing to do.
So, Chair, can I suggest that we maybe have some reasons why we've
Yes.
done this?
The reason
because
is that the living accommodation, though strictly speaking compliant, is too narrow to allow 7 people to enjoy communal living. And that the accommodation is...
Chair, can I suggest you use the words appears to be, because
that.
that's the justification
Thank
for
you.
the site visit.
If I can assist members, there's no need to go. The purpose is to do a site visit. You will gain observation of the site when whatever it may or may not appear to be at that time. So.
Please can I make a plea that now we've agreed a site visit, that people come. The last site visit, 2 site visits I went on, which I actually didn't vote for, there was only 2 of us there, you and I. And we didn't really feel that was very fair because we were then had the onus to be the ones to report back. So, no. Yes, we did vote on it. We did. We voted on the site visit. Yeah, we did. Yep. And I chose to abstain. So perhaps we don't need to discuss the details of this, but if whoever's arranging the date of the site visit could do a bit of checking to make sure we really can come, that would be very useful, because I think site visits, when there's only 1 or 2 of you there, are very, very difficult for those who go. And I think John would agree.
We really want at least 7 of us there to see what it feels like to be in that space.
We do. Okay. 7 of us all with bringing our picnic chairs, if there aren't there already. Thank you. I'm very happy with that. Let's move then to item 11, which is 3 Paynes Road.
Thank you, Chair. So
That's right, 3 Paynes Road, and it's on page 88. Thank you.
So 3
Ian.
Paynes Road, again an area with a significant number of HMOs already. This is a slightly unusual layout compared to others we've seen. It has a habitable basement space as well, which serves as the entertainment room / lounge. That has been looked at previously by Planning Inspectorate and concluded, again, bearing that in mind, that it did create satisfactory living conditions for the properties with regard to both personal and community spaces, etc. I quote from paragraph 5.6. The application is therefore in accordance with your space standards. For clarity, again, what we're looking for is the conversion of a ground floor study, which is to the rear of the building, into a bedroom. You can see there the second from the right floor plan on the ground floor. This was licensed for 8 people on the 6th of September 2019, but is currently, it has only been used for 7 people. The application expressly includes within its description for an occupation for 7 bedrooms, so it doesn't have the ambiguity we saw in the previous application. Fully compliant, as I say, with your policy on that basis. Again, it is for members to determine whether this requires plan permission. Officer's recommendation is it does not. If you feel it does require plan permission, whether it then complies with its policy, officers can advise you it does, and therefore whether it should be granted with or without planning conditions. And again, any grant of plan permission would require the standard conditions on time limit approved plans, nitrates and recreational disturbance, and be a resolution subject to section 106.
Questions for Ian? Russell and then Darren.
Interestingly enough, because I kind of mentioned this on Monday, but if this goes through to 6 to 7, I can see that there's 2 in the spaces in the basement. Would that essentially then open the door from 7 to 9 in 6 months or a year's time? I know that's not. I know. I'm just asking the question of if that would be possible.
No, it would open the door to 7 to 9 tomorrow, should they wish to apply for planning permission to make that alteration, including the physical alterations necessary to make those rooms habitable, i.e. provide appropriate outdoor amenity and space. I'm unaware if either of those spaces that are grey boxes on the plans are actually rooms or habitable rooms currently. The plans certainly show no access to them, and again, not unusual to have, obviously, in a basement plan, non-habitable space included, so that would require plan permission potentially for those physical alterations, and in any case would require plan permission for that change from the 7-bed to the 8 or 9-bed, if members were of the opinion that that was a material change of use. Again, it would fall within the remit of those applications we've been asked to bring to you to make those judgments, should the applicant seek that. As always, members, it's incumbent upon you to determine the application in front of you, not what you might think happens in the future. That is obviously a hiding to nowhere, to be blunt, and would be considered profoundly unreasonable to suggest further development or further alteration would occur. You must judge the application on its merits in front of you.
Thank you.
Darren.
Thank you, Judith. Coming back to the here and now, I'm particularly concerned about paragraph 3.3, which calls for better ventilation for basement windows. Given that it's a basement, which is different to the ground floor, the first floor, and secondly, particularly the desire to have proper ventilation due to satisfying COVID guidance, I wanted to know, again, if this were to be approved, whether that would be a suitable planning condition, particularly given that this is an area covered by SPD 20. Sorry to keep referring back to that, but it is an amenity issue.
Apologies, I was just pulling up the appeal decision on this so I can give you the inspector's judgment on this, but could you repeat your specific question?
That's okay. So paragraph 3.3 refers to basement windows and saying the need for greater ventilation in those windows. Given that those are basement windows, therefore it is a basement, therefore there would not normally be windows, there would not normally be flats unless you have planning permission in there. And given the need to ensure that we have as much ventilation as possible, both in terms of satisfying our climate emergency goals and also in terms of satisfying our COVID protocol goals, would that be a suitable planning condition? That essentially, unless that is done, or we would ask for that to be done. Is that something we could put in as a condition?
So again, you're in that difficult crossover area between, because that's again private sector housing have looked at that for their licensing needs, and it is therefore, and the standards they quote in that issue that 20% of the floor space must have standard windows isn't a planning requirement. So you would be directly attempting to import a separate regulatory regime into the planning service, which is probably the step too far to incorporate that. This, as I say, has been looked at by the planning inspector at this issue, and to quote from the planning inspector's decision, we've paraphrased it in 5.6, but to give you his full wording that's come from, which is dealing with the matter of the usability and acceptability of the amenity spaces for residents. Passing through the dining room to access the kitchen can be done with reasonable ease, although in a basement the lounge receives adequate natural light from an almost full-height glazed window which opens onto external steps into the garden. Whilst outlook from the basement is limited, the dining room and kitchen both receive adequate natural light and have a satisfactory outlook with existing windows. The inspector has judged for the planning purposes, because obviously that technical specification regarding the percentage of wall space and indeed that ventilation issues are private sector housing and building control for planning purposes, the inspectors looked at exactly the issue you're looking at, the quality of the living environment in that basement, and has added additional details for you that it has an almost full height glazed window and external steps to the garden, creating an adequate natural light and consequently an appropriate living environment in his opinion. That's obviously an opinion shared by your officers in this recommendation.
Any further questions? Because clearly if we take out of the consideration the basement, deeming it not to be very suitable potentially, we only get 27 square metres from the kitchen. Steve?
Yeah, Ian, sorry, because I've only got these. It's a bit difficult to see. On page 91, the second image across, I'm assuming, is the ground floor, although it looks like it's been cropped off, but I'm assuming that's the ground floor. The bit that's at the top of that picture, is that bedroom 7?
That's right. That area to the rear of the kitchen is currently a study space that will be converted with alteration to that external door into bedroom 7.
Immediately south of that on the image, is that a lobby to separate it from the kitchen?
Indeed so. So it is a lobby around that external door so that there is a separate space and a door going outwards to the right and into the bedroom to the left.
So the nearest toilet that's available to them is right at the other end of the house, near bedroom 6, is that?
Yes, the nearest toilet is on the other side of the ground floor, yeah.
And if they want to have a shower, they've got to go down that end of the house and then go upstairs to the first floor and share a shower and toilet with 3 other bedrooms on that level, is that right?
Meeting your standards, yes, that is right.
Okay, so I would argue that this is one of those situations where it meets the standards, but who the hell would want to live there?
Well, particularly if you wanted to go across the kitchen in your nightie when everybody else was trying to, you know. My point exactly. Good. Russell?
Yeah, just to point out, actually, that it's not just that bedroom. There's also the other bedroom as well. So essentially, we were talking before about how it being, in this case, it's 5-to-1 shower, but yeah, it just seems not ideal.
Members, I will again have to give you the caution it fully meets the standards that you apply both in your SPD and the private sector housing. So to suggest that 2 bathrooms for 7 bedrooms is unacceptable, that's not the adopted policy that you have created through your guidance, either for licensing or planning. It is behoving upon you to obviously apply your guidance in a consistent and reasonable way, and members should give careful consideration for an attempt to depart from it on an individual merits without very clear reasons why this is a unique and special circumstance. To suggest that would be unacceptable.
I mean, you know, there are other visions of things that happen in the middle of the night that could go wrong in bedroom B7, aren't there? If you wanted to be sick or something and you have to run through the kitchen.
Well, you'd just be sick in the kitchen sink, aren't you? Just because I'm going to becoming slightly delirious, have we agreed that this actually requires planning? Have we done that bit? No, we haven't done that bit yet. Let's do that bit then.
So can I ask whether or not you think
I
this is
suggest that it does.
Material change?
Yeah.
And,
based on the established wording.
And I'm going to ask you to raise your hands, can you raise your hands, please? Second it, George. Okay, we agree that it's. Are you, Lynn, are you voting here? Thank you very much. So we've agreed it should have planning permission. Having agreed that, and asking various questions about different scenarios of how somebody in bedroom 7 might feel if they were living there, can we move on to say whether or not we would want to give this planning permission or not to give it planning permission? Comments, please. Steve.
Okay. I think this one's different to all the others, and I think this is an example where the letter of the policy is being met, but in achieving the letter of the policy, it fails to provide quality accommodation. So I'm not going to use PCS 20 for this one, because it clearly does meet the standard that we've asked for in the SPD, which is guidance. But PCS 23 is relevant here, because this is about the quality accommodation and the quality and therefore the experience of the people living in that accommodation. And if you're in bedroom 7, I don't think that, although the number of bathrooms, etc., is policy compliant, and we need to be clear in the statement we make here that we recognise that to be the case, what those numbers are not intended to do is just, this is the numbers that you need on a list, and how can you slot them into that without any consideration of the people that would live there. So I would say that it does fail. It might be adequate, which I think is the word that's been used in the feedback, but it is not of any quality, and I think there's a difference between the two. So the inspector didn't. I'm not going mad, am I? Because it's the amount of things. The inspector previously said satisfactory living conditions. We're not looking at satisfactory. Satisfactory would be the living conditions under the SPD. But it would not meet quality definition of PCS 23. So I think there's a qualitative difference between the two. I'm sure Ian will tell me I'm wrong, and I understand why he feels he has to. But I do, looking at that, you've got, like going into a basement, if we start to see a whole string of these things coming in with basements dug out as well now, I mean, where's it going to end? Incidentally, anecdotally, this happened in London. In a number of very expensive multi-million-pound properties where people inadvisedly excavated their basements, and the next thing they were faced with was coming home to find a pile of rubble. And I know we cite building control. You try and get building control to go out and actually look at this stuff in a meaningful way. It's really hard, especially in the COVID environment that we've been in. They just don't have the resources. So I am worried about that, and I actually don't like the look of it at all. We turned down one in Fawcett Road. As you go down from the longer bit of Fawcett Road into what I call Old Fawcett Road by the Golden Eagle, just before you get to the corner where the chip shop used to be when I was a kid, if you look across, there's a basement. And that basement has a wedge-shaped glass block flat on the ground. And then a ledge just inside. That is the only light for that room, and we turned it down for planning permission, and that was upheld as not suitable, and it's full of stuff and people are using it. Now this is the issue we have here, is about actually enforcing these things even when we're successful. So going down this basement route again, we looked at one a couple of years ago. It was like the back hole of Calcutta. That's their lounge. This is not a cinema room, it's their lounge. Not everybody wants to sit in a lounge and watch a film. So I think for the position and the layout of the building fails to meet a quality standard that we require from PCS 23.
And does that lead you to a recommendation? That was the recommendation. Anybody like to second that?
I'll second that.
Russell.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any alternative recommendations?
Chairman, if I may, we will need some very specific wording. Councillor Pitt raised a few points there and then did invite that I would probably disagree with him, and I will have to on some of those issues. Some of the wording you were stating, Councillor Pitt, was that because of those issues, it's contrary to policy. The space standards, of course, to be absolutely clear, of course, it's not the space standards that is therefore contrary to policy. As we say, it meets the space standards. It's obviously the configuration and layout of the space, which we've talked about before, it doesn't create, and the wording within PCS 23 is a good standard of living accommodation. So it's actually that issue, and you'll need to be specific. And again, if you may, obviously the point that was raised is that it's for the occupier of bedroom 7 who would have to traverse the kitchen and dining room to reach a toilet or bathroom. Is a issue around whether that person has a good living environment. So that's one element to it, and there's another element about whether or not the quality of the basement entertainment room / lounge is adequate as well. And that they're two very different issues and would obviously be argued differently on an appeal. So if they are the issues, they would have to be articulated accordingly. However, it's obviously incumbent for me to advise the committee. These are matters. This is an application that has already gone through appeal, and those matters have been looked at by an inspector, and it's entirely unaltered as it comes forward to you today. And obviously, I would draw your attention to paragraph 110. No, it's not 110, is it? Where's it gone? To paragraph 5.6 at the bottom of there, where very expressly the inspector concluded that the development provides satisfactory living conditions for the occupiers of the property with regards to the provision of both personal and communal space and access to the bathroom facility. So exactly the issues you're raising concerns with, the inspector has already made a judgment on and doesn't agree with you. So again, it's you imposing your judgment in advance and over the inspector's judgment, and with a consequently likelihood of success or no likelihood of success.
Steve, can I suggest also?
But I want to be really clear here, Chair, and I haven't done that at any point today, but I'm doing it now, because I think the inspector's wrong for the reasons that I've stated, is that the level of amenity for the prospective resident of bedroom 7 is not acceptable to me, and I hope it's not acceptable to the committee, and if the inspector decides to overrule us, so be it, but I think the inspector has made a mistake.
I was going to suggest that the wording you might use, just because we haven't quite got the wording yet, under paragraph 1.9, that was the reasons for refusal we gave before, still in my mind stand, but we need to add a sentence about, in particular, the environment for bedroom 7.
Yes, it probably just needs...
If you could tweak that, maybe that would do.
Yeah, the proposed development will give rise to poor quality living environment, particularly for the proposed occupant of bedroom 7 and other future occupiers of the property, having regard to reduce... the rest of it's not really as relevant. The main thing is, I cannot believe somebody would want to live in that bedroom, the other side of a kitchen, miles away from a toilet or and a different floor away from a shower. Every other configuration we've looked at today does not fail on that judgment. But I always try and look at these things. Would I live there? And in lots of cases, as much as I might be reluctant to and not particularly want to, yes, I could. Would I want to live in that room, nowhere near a flipping loo? No, I would not.
I was just, I'm trying to help you here. I was suggesting some of those words would be helpful. We have no proposal to do otherwise than refuse this on the grounds suggested. Have we got a seconder for Stephen Pitt? Linda, thank you. So we've got a proposer and a seconder to refuse this on those grounds. Ian, have you got sufficient words for us on that?
I was just wanting to double check that. I'm just pulling that out from there and making sure that the alteration you're discussing is the key matter that you actually want in here. So the only point Councillor Pitt has put forward specifically is the proposed development will give rise to a poor quality living environment, taken from that paragraph 1.9. Obviously, it's only for future occupiers, because the distance to bathroom is the same for the existing occupiers. So for future occupiers of the property, due to the distance from bathroom facilities to the future resident of bedroom 7, and that would be contrary to PCS 23 of the Portsmouth plan. So that would be the reason for refusal.
Is everybody happy with that? The seconder and everybody else happy with that amendment? Do you want something else, Stephen? Okay. So can I ask you to raise your hands if you agree we should refuse it on those grounds, together with the nitrate grounds, of course? Yeah. Unanimous to refuse. Thank you very much. We're very nearly there. We have one more, which is page 94, 22 Montgomery Road, Southsea. Again, in an area with quite a lot of HMOs. Page 94. Ian, would you like to introduce this to us, please? We have no other. We have objections, obviously, from the East St Thomas's Resident Forum, but we don't have any other specific deputations on this one, apart from the one that we've had across the piece from Councillor Jeffrey. Ian.
22 Montgomery Road. Bear with me. Again, very similar slide deck as members have already seen. Let me just call up my issue. So this case, so there's a number of HMOs in the area as before. Similar overall circumstance. Here you can see the existing layout and the far left ground floor. That lounge on the bottom left image becoming bedroom number 7 to change that occupancy from 6 to 7. Again, it is obviously incumbent upon members to determine whether or not this is an application that requires plan permission, requiring development, so the first judgment there, and then whether or not it should be granted, making judgments against your policies if that is the case on these matters. I would suggest, members, the key consideration in that circumstance is a communal space standard one. 2 of the bedrooms are just below those standard space sizes of 10 square metres, bedroom 6 being 9.5 and the proposed bedroom 7 being 9.7 square metres. Consequently, not all bedrooms are over 10 square metres and a strict interpretation of your guidance requires 34 square metres of communal floor space. The communal floor space in the combined living space in this case is 23 square metres below that. In light of both the fact that it doesn't need plan permission officer's opinion and is only a very minor failure of those requirements to all bedrooms to be over 10 square metres, officers are satisfied that it does overall create a reasonable amenity floor space for future residents, and plan permission can consequently be granted, but obviously the key judgment for you today. To be absolutely clear, a licence was valid from the 16th of May 2022, so a very recent licence for 7 bedrooms. I do note, I think this report doesn't have the HMO count percentage in there. As you saw from this image, lots of HMOs in the area. There are 81 properties, 31 of which are HMOs, so 38.3%, if members are interested in that number. Obviously, this doesn't change the percentage of HMOs, though, so it has limited, if any, relevance to your determination.
Thank you, Ian. And questions to Ian about this application? Darren.
Thank you. Ian, this is another one where this is a non-determination issue here. What is the current situation with regards to the appeal for non-determination?
So we still have exactly the same, still have no start date, so it's still within your gift to make a determination of the application with obviously consequent outcomes for the applicant, I'm sure.
Thank you, Ian. That was my only question.
Any other questions? No. Now it falls upon us to decide whether or not this is a material enough change to warrant a planning application. Darren?
I believe it is, for the reason, again, using the words that we have done at every single previous opportunity as amended by Mr Maguire at about 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Russell?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Do I have any alternative recommendations here? If not, then we'll move to a vote. We're voting on whether or not we agree that it needs planning permission. And all those in favour of that, would you raise your hands? That's everybody, thank you. Now falls upon us that we've agreed it does need planning permission to decide whether or not we should approve this application or should refuse it.
It's a question related to that part of our deliberations. Ian, I noticed that there seems to be a discrepancy on the table and for the room sizes and those on the actual floor plans. Is that the developer has conveniently rounded them up to 10 metres squared? So that they thought that we might decide that the combined living space only needed to be 22.5 metres squared. I mean, it could be a genuine mistake, I suppose, couldn't it? But there's that we did separate measurements and found them to be different.
Yes, two key issues there to give members that reassurance that officers do scrutinise plans. We don't just take people's word for it. Yeah, we've undertaken our own assessment of these plans, and yes, I can confirm, as is normal mathematical custom, these numbers have been provided without decimal points and thus appropriately rounded, and they both 9.5 and 9.6 would correctly round to 10 metres, but as point of actual fact, they are a couple of square foot. We're not talking big numbers. It's a very fair representation, if it's a slightly cheeky one, from the applicant. I would just add, and with apologies, members, I do have some images of the internals of that communal floor space, which we can put on screen, which I forgot to show you previously. So to be, for transparency, worth including probably. So there you can see the outside space, and that is looking up through the kitchen to the dining area, and obviously looking downward, sitting area in this case, and looking down through the sitting area to the kitchen. So you can see, so it is a relatively constrained space, undeniably, but obviously furnished to high quality. But that is the appearance of that communal space. And just for completeness, there you go. There's the bedrooms as well. They look like bedrooms, and a bathroom, which looks like a bathroom. So just to give you the imagery for that space as laid out at the moment.
Another question here. In this case, if you had a bicycle, could you store it at the back, and would you go out through the French windows?
Yes and yes. Yeah.
Question, Steve.
I think this is actually an easy one. They've submitted plans showing the rooms fairly, as Ian said, rounded up to 10 square metres. They're not 10 square metres. And that's why they've offered up a combined living space of 23 metres squared, which would have exceeded the 22.5 that they would have been required to have were the room sizes all compliant. So we want to take out a lounge because we're saying the bedrooms are all big enough, and actually two of them aren't. And again, this is about the amenity of the residents living in that property. Are we honestly going to sit here and say that we think that we are delivering quality accommodation for people to live in, a good standard of living, by allowing the lounge to be removed, so that the only thing they've got is a little corridor at the back of the kitchen with two two-seater sofas either side of it as their entire communal living space? I'm not voting for that, so I'm quite happy to propose a form of words that says, in terms of the communal area, the communal kitchen living area would meet the requirements for a 3 to 5 person HMO. However, as 2 of the 7 bedrooms do not exceed 10 metres squared, the reduction in communal space to be provided cannot be applied, and the requirement is 34 metres squared. Having regard to the shortfall of bedroom 6 and bedroom 7, and the size of the remaining 5 bedrooms which do exceed 10 metres squared, it is considered on balance that the communal living space is insufficient, which is basically, Ian, turning your paragraph 5.6 into a negative.
And that's insufficient is a word that covers, obviously, taking your bicycle through there, the fact that this doesn't actually show kitchen units, so we can't tell very easily that that's a representative thing, and also the narrowness of the whole thing.
In percentage terms, it's a 32% shortfall on our space standards. That's too much.
Darren.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that for the same reasons that Steve has outlined, and I just wanted to offer up some observations from today as well as for this application. I think today...
to save that for the very end.
Okay, I'll happily do that. On that basis, I second what Steve has just said.
We won't spend long on it, don't worry. Any other observation, comments, or anything that people want to say about this application? We've got a proposal to refuse and a seconder. Is there anybody who wants to accept the application? No? Okay. So, yes, I was just about to say that. Well done. I think we need to make sure that the we've written the reasons, haven't you, Steve? They okay?
Well, let's just check that Ian's content that he understands the wording of the reason for refusal.
And we're going to add nitrates to that.
Yes.
So, entirely understand the point. So there's almost more words than we need, I would suggest. But
by all means, take some out.
any in particular. So to convert, as you've just read out, I think what I captured is, while in terms of the communal area, the communal kitchen living area would meet the requirements of 3 to 5 HMO, as 2 of the 7 bedrooms do not exceed 10 metres, the reduction cannot be applied. All of that's fairly superfluous, because that's how we come to it. The key issue is, having regard to the shortfall of 0.5 and 0.4 and the size of the remaining 5 bedrooms, which do exceed 10 metres, it is nevertheless considered on balance the communal living space is insufficient. As I was typing out, I was also putting together an alternative set of wording, which is, I can invite you to consider to say the same thing. The proposed development would give rise to a poor quality living environment for existing and future occupiers of the property due to the inadequate provision of communal living space, having regard to the shortfall of bedroom 6 and bedroom 7. This would be contrary to policy PCS 23 of the Portsmouth local plan.
Yeah, I was particularly keen on keeping the words on balance in there, because an inspector looking at this will look at the on balance decision that officers made that it might be okay, and we're saying on balance it's not okay. So we're not massively disagreeing with you, because you weren't 100% enthusiastic with it in the first place, but on balance you thought it was acceptable. I'm saying on balance we don't.
Again, that planning balance is implied across the board, so we can include that. So we would simply proceed to say that on balance the proposed development would give rise to a poor quality living environment.
And I think we also wanted the word insufficient in there, didn't we? Because it's insufficient in more than one way. Yeah.
I had the word inadequate. I will change that to insufficient. Would you like me to read that again for clarity?
Do you want that read again for clarity? I'm all right with it.
I can do it very slowly and take a long time. On balance, the proposed development will give rise to a poor quality living environment for existing and future occupiers of the property due to the insufficient provision of communal living space, having regard to the shortfall of bedroom 6 and bedroom 7. This will be contrary to policy PCS 23, etc.
And the nitrates.
And then obviously a reason for refusal associated with nitrates and recreational disturbance, which would require section 106 to resolve an appeal, would be added.
Thank you very much. So now we need to move to a vote on that. And can I ask for a show of hands for those who agree that we should refuse? Yes, Darren seconded it. On that we should refuse this on those grounds. Well, thank you all very much. We've had a long meeting, and I thank you all very much for your patience, and especially your patience with me fumbling a bit, as it's my first meeting as full-time chair of this committee. You wanted to say something, Darren? Do you want it on record or not on record?
It can be off if required. It's just a series of, you can switch it off if you wish.
So I'll declare this meeting closed. Darren.
Is it off?
Just a minute. Just a minute.